Hi everyone, here I am again with my, I think, sixth video. Let me remind you, I'm still new at this, so I'm trying to figure out how it works. So mistakes may appear or not, depending on how lucky I get. Today I am going to be bringing up one of those topics that I mentioned at the beginning of my videos the first time, which was that I'm going to be presenting to you guys some original thoughts, original ideas that are not ideas that are in books or in psychology texts or in psychology training or anything like that. And so I'm always very excited to share these new ideas with me, with other people, that I have with other people rather, because I have known by people telling me later that they have proved very helpful. So again, my desire is that perhaps this will be helpful to you too. And so here we go with another new idea. Today I'll be talking about what we call, my partner and I, Robert Landquist, the Criticism Club. So the Criticism Club is a name that we came up with in talking about something rather sad and painful in a humorous way. So this is something that we became aware of, a particular dynamic or phenomenon that we became aware of its existence by when we were dating each other. And this came as a result of something that were very different. So his psychology and my psychology in relation to this criticism idea is very different. And one of the things that happen as a result of our differences, oftentimes differences are difficult and challenging and cause problems, but difficulties can also create good things. So this is an example of where my way of being, my psychology, and Robert's way of being, his psychology, ended up making us aware of this phenomenon. So the Criticism Club can be called that, which is what we called it, or you can also call it, if you want to be more sensitive, which is important to be, the Sensitivity Club. And it is a phenomenon that we notice happen as a characteristic of some people, that they tend to feel criticized or judged very easily, and they tend to interpret other people's comments as being critical or judgmental. So these people who fall into this very unwanted club, nobody wants to belong to it because you suffer, what happens is that they interpret, it's really an interpretation of comments as if they are attacking them or judging them. So they will react harshly when you or somebody else makes a comment that could be as simple and as inane as asking a person to move something. If you're, like, say I'm at my office and I ask somebody to use a coaster, just that preference of mine to use a coaster, that inane tiny little comment, which is a direction of preference, could be taken by somebody as you're judging me, you're criticizing me. So it could be as simple as that. Another thing that we have found, and I recently had with one of my patients, is making a comment about how you could do something better, like offering the idea that there's another way you could do it that might be better or improved. That comment of better or improvement could also be taken as a criticism. And also any corrections, any correction could be taken as a criticism. Any preference could be taken as a criticism, like the example of the coaster. And requests that you make of things that you prefer one way or another, that could be taken as a criticism. Or even, like I said, I'm saying that maybe another way of doing things, and the mere fact that you're suggesting there's another way could be taken as, for that person that belongs to this unwanted club, they may feel like you're telling them what they were doing was wrong, even though you weren't saying that or you weren't meaning that at all. So one of the things that happened as Robert and I started dating and getting to notice this difference between us is that I was surprised to find that many comments and things that I would say felt bad to him. And I was really surprised because I really had no intention of causing any harm or of being critical or judgmental. So because we are very different in this way, we began to notice that there is indeed a difference, and that some people are experiencing this very negative experience, some people very frequently, and some people not so frequently. Some people, it happens to them less often, and for some people it happens to them maybe when they're not feeling very well more frequently, when they're tired or they're stressed, or when they're going through a difficult time. So these particular stressors, lack of rest, feeling under the weather, being depressed, being anxious, those things affect all of us. So what really happens is that when these conditions are present, any difficulty that we have psychological gets augmented, gets bigger. So no wonder that the people who have this phenomenon, this characteristic of having an ease with which they can feel criticized or judged, this will be more likely to happen when they're under distress. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the kind of comment that a person who is part of this has these characteristics that we've called the criticism club or the sensitive club. One typical comment that would guide you into whether somebody is part of this dynamic or not is that they often use this comment. They say that they feel attacked. And if you are not in any way being attacked, if it's you or someone else, if there's no derogatory comment, no rejecting comment, if you can flat out see that this comment didn't have any aggression to it because of the kind of comment, it is surprising to the person who is in the receiving end of the comment that they're being attacked. It is surprising because it's very different to the experience you're having. So I'm going to give you some examples of typical language that I have found people who fall in this category or these characteristics, comments that they have made that can guide you, again, either for yourself or someone else, to know if this is happening, if this moment of feeling criticized or judged is happening. And I'm going to read you some of them. I actually have to read them. I'm going to try and remember, but I probably will have to read them because it so happens, and I'll tell you over time why it is that I don't have this particular characteristic, but it so happens that I am so removed from this criticism club, which is what allowed this paradigm to develop between Robert and I, that I don't remember this language because it's not within my experience to use this language. So I'm going to try and remember on my own. So one of them is, I can't remember on my own, you're dragging me over the coals. That's a comment that I've heard. You're ripping me to shreds. That's another comment that I've heard. You're busting my balls. That's another comment that I've heard. You're strip searching me. This tends to be more when you're asking questions, but nonetheless, the person is feeling judged or criticized, but you may be asking a question. You're interrogating me. You may be simply asking some questions out of curiosity or wanting to know more, and the person may literally tell you, you're interrogating me. And another one that I've heard, and I'll come up with more maybe another day, but another one is you're wanting to expose me. So I want you to notice that this language is rather violent, right? Shutting me to, how do you say it? I have to read it. Ripping me to shreds. You see, I tell you, I don't know this language very well. I've heard it, but it goes out of my mind because it's not my experience. So what I want you to know is when you hear comments like this, they are a bit violent, and it might be jarring if you're on the receiving end because you're not being violent. However, I do want you to know that fascinatingly and interestingly enough, the person who's making these rather extreme violent comments is literally feeling that way. So they literally are feeling like you're ripping them, or that you're interrogating them, or that you're ringing them over the coals. They actually feel that way. Why do I tell you this? Two reasons. Number one, I want you to recognize the language, so it happens. If it happens to you, that you may consider now that you're learning this, that this may be happening to this person. Number two, because I want you to also have some empathy for this other person or yourself, because the person is actually feeling like this is happening, even though it may not be happening. So I always try to be kind and to bring kindness to any situation that it has psychological injury. And the reason for these experiences are original injuries, usually very early in life, when you were young, when you were a child. And this could be triggering that. So rather than rejecting the person's comment, if you can, you might just pause for a minute, take a deep breath, and remind yourself that this person may be actually experiencing it this way, even though you may not have meant it that way. So what is important about this? What is important about this is that, to my dismay, and Robert's too, but particularly mine, since I don't have these characteristics, we have found that this is actually very prevalent in our society. So in other words, many people belong to this criticism or sensitive club. And the only difference is that some people have it very, very frequently and very strongly. So it's a matter of degree. Some people have these characteristics that happen very often, very frequently. And other people, they don't happen that often. And again, to some of these people, it only happens when they're not feeling well, or they're depressed, or they're anxious, or they're going through something difficult, or it's a topic. Like I'm remembering a situation with my best friend, where it was the topic that made her go to the criticism club, if you wish. So in that particular case, I was telling my friend that one of her children was now telling her about some difficulty in their childhood, and as she said that, I felt really glad, and I thought, wow, this must be that you are much more open now. You're much more available, and therefore, because this is an adult child, therefore he's now more able to tell you these things. So I was actually coming from a place of happiness and like happiness for her and her child, her adult child. And she later told me, thank goodness we have a good friendship, she later told me that she felt really bad at that moment because she felt criticized. Needless to say, I was shocked because I thought I was celebrating her ability to be more open and have the adult child be more communicative with her. But to her, as she explained it to me, it meant that whatever she had done before was bad. That whatever had been before this moment was bad parenting. So this is an example from real life. And I've experienced this, of course, with people from my social life, like my friend, but I've experienced it with patients many times. So what I would like you to do is, now that you have this information, I'd like you to consider if this applies to anybody you know. If you can think, oh yeah, I have a friend or a boss or, a neighbor who seems to react kind of strongly at times when I make comments, and they seem to get upset with me, and they might have even told you, you're attacking me, or this extreme language I've told you about. Probably the kind of person that would tell you the extreme language maybe a little closer to you. They feel more at ease telling you that. But so I want you to consider if you know anybody with these characteristics, so that you begin to understand a little bit more what might that be. Because as usual, what I want is to help people understand the psychology of us people better than before. So that's one side. The other side is I want you to consider whether you are part of the criticism club. And if you are, I want you to then consider if indeed this might happen to you, if you might be able to then open up to somebody you care and cares for you, like a partner or a best friend, and perhaps tell them a little bit about this and ask them, have they noticed that this happens to you, if you are open to that, so that they may be able to help you when it happens. But if you don't have the ability to do that, or you don't have anybody safe to do that with, you could simply begin to notice it for yourself. And if that's the case, I want you to consider introducing the idea that perhaps this impression, this interpretation that you have of being attacked or being judged may not be accurate. So to begin to look at that, could there be a different reason for this? In other words, is the language really telling of judgment and criticism? Now, there's two ways that this can happen. It can happen that somebody is using language that could be interpreted as criticism. That doesn't mean it is, but it could be interpreted, okay? But it can also happen when you, let's say you look at the transcript of the conversation and you notice that nothing in that transcript, none of the language shows judgment or criticism. So it can happen when there's something that could mean that, even though the person may have no intention, okay? Or it can also happen when the person has not only no intent, but there's really nothing to evidence that idea of judgment or attack. So this is the subject that I wanted to bring to you today, and I guess I want you to use this to think of others as well as to think about yourself. And I will be bringing you more examples in the future. But for now, I want to tell you a couple of things to do. I want you to consider, if the other person is the one who's doing this, to consider the idea that they really are feeling this badly, even though you may not have done it, and to have, therefore, a little bit more empathy, but also to have empathy for yourself, Because if somebody is treating you and believing that you've attacked them when you haven't, it really feels bad to us. We feel hurt. So to also have a little empathy for yourself, that of course this is jarring and of course this feels bad, but that the other person doesn't really intend to harm you, even though they do harm you, but they have no intent to. And that is for psychological reasons that, again, I will talk about in more detail in other videos in the future. The other thing I want you to do is to practice thinking of different interpretations for the same situation. So to think of different interpretations for why somebody might say this. So for example, my friend, if we use her as an example, thought that my comment meant that I thought she had been doing a poor job as a parent prior. Could it mean that? It could mean that. Could it mean something else? Well, you know in this case that it did, because I was coming from a place of wonderful, this is great, you are now somehow become more open and your adult children can come to you more easily. So I was coming from zero judgment and more of a celebratory state. So could one interpret that comment as somebody being happy for you? That's another interpretation. Now, you cannot know what the person really means, but if it's an educated guess, and if you know that this person is somebody who cares about you and loves you, it's easier to consider that maybe the second interpretation or something similar, meaning an interpretation that's more benign versus negative. So when you're in the criticism club, the interpretations are always negative. Remember, it's violent language. Remember, the most common comment coming from somebody with this problem is, I am attacked. I am being attacked. That's pretty violent, right? So remember that there's no way we're going to feel attacked if we're considering that the person is benign, right? So that's it for today. I wanted to ask you, because I've heard from patients of mine that they don't know when I have a new video out. So I wanted to tell you that if you would like to hear when I have new videos, to do the notification. I think it's a little bell. If you could do that, that way you will know when I do a new video. And I also wanted to thank you for being here with me and sharing this experience with me. And to ask you that if you have enjoyed it, and if you think you've learned something from it, to both give it a like and also perhaps to subscribe, because I am trying to create an audience. As you know, I've just started, so I'm trying to create an audience so that more people can benefit from these ideas. And so if you have enjoyed it or if you feel you've learned something, I would really, really appreciate if you could subscribe. And I'm going to end the way I end my groups, with a little soft sound that sends you to a good day or a good evening as we end this video for today. Goodbye.